In the heart of Lagos, where the traffic hums like an anthem and dreams rise with the sun, a stylish young woman named Amaka strutted down the street in her sleek high heels, her makeup flawless, her perfume trailing behind like royalty. She was headed for her first day at a prestigious advertising firm. As she laughed with her friend on the phone, her eyes landed on something, or rather, someone. A sweaty young man, dark with dust and labor, pushed a rickety wheelbarrow filled with roasted corn. His clothes were worn, his fingers blackened from the heat of the fire. Without thinking, Amaka burst into laughter. "Who still sells corn like this in 2025? She scoffed. "He probably can't even spell CO." Her friend chuckled. "Some people are just stuck in poverty." The man looked up. His eyes met Amaka's for a moment. But instead of reacting, he simply smiled, calm, quiet, and mysterious, then returned his corn. Amaka walked off, never imagining that her careless words had just pierced the heart of a man who wasn't what he seemed. For in that dusty shirt stood a millionaire in disguise, and her world was about to turn upside down. Later that same morning, Amaka stood in front of a tall glass building in Victoria Island, the headquarters of Visionaire Advertising, one of the most sought-after firms in Lagos. Her heart raced with excitement. This was her big break. Inside the lobby, marble floors gleamed. The receptionist handed her a welcome package. "You're just in time. Orientation begins in 10 minutes. Conference room A." Amaka smoothed her dress, checked her reflection, and stepped into the elevator. "Today is the start of my new life," she thought proudly. But nothing could prepare her for what happened next. As she entered the conference room, she froze. At the head of the table, dressed in a tailored suit, sat the same man from the roadside, the corn seller. He wasn't pushing a wheelbarrow anymore. He was commanding the room. All the staff stood and greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Chuka." Amaka's mouth went dry. Her heart pounded in shock. This can't be happening. She quickly lowered her head, hoping he wouldn't recognize her. But Chuka's eyes scanned the room and paused right on her. He gave a small, knowing smile. He remembered. And Amaka? She nearly fainted. "Absolutely. Here's your next installment." Amaka sat stiffly at the edge of her seat, her palms sweaty, her heart racing like a drum. What kind of cruel joke was this? She wondered. Just a few hours ago, she'd mocked this man on the street. Now, he was the CEO of the very company she'd just joined? Chuka spoke calmly to the room, introducing the company's mission and values. His voice was rich, confident, yet surprisingly warm. As he addressed the newcomers, he never once mentioned Amaka's earlier insult, not a word, but his occasional glance in her direction made her squirm. He knew, and he wasn't going to let her forget it. When the session ended, everyone stood to leave. Amaka stayed frozen in place. Her legs didn't trust her pride. As she stood up slowly, her eyes caught Chuka's once more, not in anger, not in mockery, but with quiet curiosity. It was as if he was silently asking, "Do you still think I can't spell CEO?" Amaka rushed out of the room, embarrassed beyond words. Her confidence was shattered. But Chuka hadn't said a thing, because sometimes silence speaks louder than shame. And for Amaka, the lesson had only just begun. Of course, here's the next part of the story. Back at her desk, Amaka sat staring at her screen, but her mind was far from any orientation manual. She kept replaying the morning in her head. Her laughter, her words, the corn, the dusty hands, and then Mr. Chuka, commanding respect in a spotless suit. Her cheeks burned with regret. "I really messed up," she muttered under her breath. Around her, other new employees gossiped excitedly about their new boss. "He's so young and so humble," one whispered. "Can you believe he walks around the office like he's one of us?" "Humble?" Amaka echoed quietly. Her pride crumbled even further. During the lunch break, Amaka kept her distance. She didn't eat. She didn't smile. Every time she thought of her morning insult, her stomach turned. But Chuka, he walked past her table at one point, casually sipping from a coffee cup. Their eyes met again. Still, he said nothing. He didn't need to. That gentle, unreadable smile of his held more power than any scolding words. It haunted her, and it humbled her. For the first time in a long time, Amaka, who had always judged by surface, was now being judged in silence. And it hurt. From that day forward, Amaka felt eyes on her. Not harsh or condemning, but quietly observant. Chuka never said a word about their roadside encounter. He didn't embarrass her. He didn't bring it up in meetings. But Amaka could feel it, the weight of his silent judgment. He was watching her, closely. Every time she spoke at a meeting, Chuka would glance her way. Every time she made a suggestion or stumbled through a task, his calm gaze followed. And slowly, something strange began to happen. Amaka, once arrogant and obsessed with appearance, began to change. She arrived earlier. She studied harder. She asked questions, listened more, and worked twice as hard to prove she belonged, not just to the company, but to herself. Still, the shame lingered. One evening, as she packed her bag late at the office, she looked through the glass walls of Chuka's office. He was still there, writing, thinking, alone. She wanted to walk in, to say sorry, to explain that she wasn't always that shallow girl from the street. But fear held her back, because deep down she wondered, would he ever truly forgive her? Days turned into weeks, and Amaka threw herself into her work. The pain of her earlier mistake became fuel. She volunteered for tough projects, stayed behind after hours, and studied old campaigns to understand what made them great. And all the while, Chuka said nothing. But he noticed. He saw the late emails she sent. He saw her notes scribbled during meetings. He heard when she defended junior staff in brainstorming sessions with passion and purpose. She was growing. One rainy Thursday, during a team pitch review, Amaka presented a bold new concept. Her voice trembled slightly, but her idea was fresh, vibrant, and full of promise. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then Chuka spoke. "Well done," he said calmly. "That's the kind of thinking we need." Amaka blinked in surprise. It was the first time he had spoken directly to her since that unforgettable day. Her heart swelled with something she hadn't expected, pride. Not the old, shallow kind, but the kind that grows from rising after you've fallen. In that moment, she realized, Chuka wasn't just a boss. He was a mirror, one that showed her who she had been and who she could become. A week later, Amaka received an unexpected email. Subject, special project briefing. From CEO's office. She opened it cautiously. "You've been selected to attend a closed-door strategy session on Friday at 4 p.m. Be prepared to brainstorm ideas around the theme. Beyond appearances." Mr. Chuka. Her heart skipped. Beyond appearances? Was this intentional? Was he giving her a second chance? Friday came fast. Amaka dressed modestly this time. Simple blouse, soft makeup. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to show she'd grown. The conference room was small. Only 5 other employees were there, top strategists. And at the center sat Chuka, calm and collected. When he saw her walk in, he gave her a slight nod. Not of judgment, but of invitation. The session began, and Chuka explained his vision. A campaign that would challenge people to look deeper than status, outfits, or social class. To value character over appearance. Amaka swallowed hard. This was her story, her mistake, her redemption, if she was brave enough to face it. Chuka's eyes met hers across the table. "You have anything to add, Amaka?" Her voice trembled, but she answered, "Yes, sir. I have a lot to say." The room grew quiet as all eyes turned to Amaka. She cleared her throat, her fingers gently gripping her notepad. "I believe the campaign should start with real-life stories. Stories that make people uncomfortable. Stories where people admit how they judged others and were wrong." Chuka's gaze never wavered. "I once laughed at someone on the street," she continued. "I thought I was better because of how I dressed or where I worked. But that person turned out to be far more than I imagined. That experience taught me that what we see isn't always what we get." One of the team members nodded slowly. Another jotted down notes. Amaka finished. "The campaign can't just sell products. It should sell reflection. Let's challenge people confront their own bias." Chuka leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile at the corner of his lips. "Very brave," he said softly, "and honest." Amaka exhaled. She'd told the truth. Maybe not the full story, but enough to show she'd learned. After the meeting, as the others left, Chuka lingered. He looked at her and said quietly, "You've come a long way, Amaka." And for the first time, she believed it too. The following Monday, Amaka arrived early to the office. She felt different now, lighter. She had faced her shame and spoken her truth. And instead of punishment, she was met with respect. Around noon, her office phone buzzed. "Mr. Chuka would like to see you in his office." Her heart jumped, but she steadied herself. She walked in to find him by the window, holding 2 paper cups. "Coffee?" he asked, handing her one. She blinked. "Thank you, sir." "No, sir," he said, smiling. "Just Chuka today." They sat. "I want to commend you for your input last week," he began. That took courage. Amaka lowered her eyes. "Thank you. I'm just trying to do better." Chuka nodded. "We all are. I didn't dress up in old clothes for pity. I wanted to see how people treat others with nothing to offer them. And you reminded me why this campaign matters." She looked up, surprised. "I reminded you?" "Yes," he said, "because you changed. And that's powerful." For the first time, their conversation felt personal. Not boss and employee, but 2 souls who had both learned from life. And in that warm office with coffee in hand, healing began. After that meeting, something shifted between Amaka and Chuka. It wasn't loud or romantic, not yet. It was quiet, like a soft wind between skyscrapers. Mutual respect, a new kind of connection. Chuka started involving her more in strategy meetings. He asked for her opinion in rooms filled with senior executives. And every time, Amaka delivered, with grace, clarity, and newfound humility. One evening, after a successful campaign review, Amaka was gathering her things when she noticed an envelope on her desk. It was handwritten. "You're leading the Beyond Appearances campaign. Officially. Let your voice lead the story." "See." Her mouth dropped open. "He's trusting me with the entire campaign?" Just then, her colleague Kemi walked by. "Wow. You must really be impressing the boss," she teased. Amaka smiled faintly. "I'm just trying to live differently now." But deep inside, her heart raced, not just because of the project, but because of the man who had once been a stranger on the roadside. She remembered his dusty shirt, his roasted corn, his quiet smile. And now, he was watching her rise, not for her looks, not for her charm, but for who she was becoming. The campaign kicked off with energy and vision. Amaka poured herself into every detail, from concept to design to message. The tagline, "Look Again," became the heartbeat of the project. Chuka noticed. More than once, he'd stop by her desk just to check in. "How's it going, Amaka?" "Late nights, sir. I mean Chuka," she'd say with a tired grin. He always responded with that calm nod. "You're doing well." "I mean it." Each time he said that, something stirred in her chest. Not infatuation, not fantasy, but admiration. One Friday night, the office was nearly empty. Amaka was still working on a pitch deck when Chuka walked in, holding 2 plates of suya and 2 bottles of malt. "You skipped lunch," he said simply. She smiled, surprised. "You're watching me?" He chuckled. "Only when you're forgetting to take care of yourself." They sat and ate in silence, the city lights flickering outside the window. For a moment, there was no CEO, no employee, just 2 people learning each other in the quiet. And though neither said a word about the past, the roadside, the laughter, the corn, it hovered gently in the air between them. Forgiveness was blooming. And maybe something else, too. The following week, Amaka found herself thinking about Chuka more than she meant to. It wasn't just admiration for his brilliance. It was something deeper. He was unlike any man she'd known. Quiet, yet powerful. Kind, yet commanding. Wealthy, yet humble enough to sell corn on the roadside. How many men would do that just to test people's hearts? She wondered. Before now, Amaka had dated men who wore designer clothes and bragged about overseas trips. But none of them listened the way Chuka did. None had made her question herself, and changed for the better. One evening, As they wrapped up a creative meeting, she lingered. "Chuka, can I ask you something personal?" He looked up from his notes. "Of course. Why didn't you confront me that day when I mocked you?" He paused, then said gently, "Because I wanted to see if you confront yourself." Amaka's breath caught. "And you did," he added. Their eyes locked for a moment, and in that quiet, there was no shame anymore, just understanding. No one else in the office knew what was growing between them, but in Amaka's heart, one truth was clear. This man had changed her forever. Word was spreading in the office. Whispers floated through hallways. Asterisk, have you noticed how close Chuka and Amaka have become? She's always in his office these days. Some were curious. Others were jealous. But Amaka didn't care. She was focused on the campaign, on her growth, and yes, on Chuka, though nothing romantic had happened yet. The connection between them was undeniable. One afternoon, her colleague, Kemi, pulled her aside. "Babe, people are talking. They say you're climbing because of him." Amaka's chest tightened. "That's not fair. I've worked harder than anyone." "I know," Kemi said softly, "but not everyone sees that. Just be careful." That night, Amaka sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't using Chuka. She wasn't chasing status. For once, what she felt was real. She remembered the man on the street. No wealth, no fame, just a corn seller with kind eyes. And yet, even then, he had her attention. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about growth, about connection, about two people who saw each other for who they really were, beyond status, beyond appearances. And whether the world liked it or not, her heart was changing. The launch day finally arrived. Look Again hit social media, billboards, and television all at once. The concept was simple but powerful. Everyday people revealing surprising truths about themselves. A janitor who's a poet, a mechanic who's an inventor, a corn seller who's a CEO. Amaka watched from the office screen as the campaign exploded. Likes, shares, comments, praise. One user posted, "This made me cry. We judge too quickly." Asterisk, another wrote, "Whoever created this deserves an award." Amaka sat quietly at her desk, overwhelmed with emotion. Chuka walked in just as a news anchor on TV said. The genius behind this viral movement is Visionaire Advertising's own rising star, Amaka Ease. The entire office turned to look at her. Some clapped. Others were stunned. Chuka smiled proudly. She had earned this. Later that evening, as the team celebrated with drinks and cake, Chuka called for quiet. He stepped forward, holding a glass. "I want to personally thank the woman who took a painful lesson and turned it into power." He turned to her. "Amaka, this campaign is your story." And today the world listened. The room erupted in applause. But all she could see was him. The celebration continued into the night. Music played softly in the background. Colleagues laughed, took selfies, and toasted the success. But Amaka stood quietly near the balcony, watching the Lego skyline shimmer. Behind her, she heard the familiar voice. "You always find quiet corners, don't you?" She turned. It was Chuka, holding 2 glasses of juice. She smiled. Sometimes the noise gets too loud. They stood side by side, sipping in silence for a moment. Then Chuka said, "You become someone I deeply admire, Amaka." Her heart fluttered. She looked up at him. "I thought I was here to learn about the world," he continued. "But instead, I watched someone transform and teach me more than I expected." He offered his hand. "May I have this dance?" Her eyes widened. "Here? Now?" "Why not?" He pulled her gently toward the center of the room. The music slowed. Their co-workers watched in surprise, then smiled, clapping lightly. As Chuka placed his hand on her waist, Amaka whispered, "Is this real?" He leaned in and said softly, "It's as real as the day you laughed at me and as beautiful as who you've become since." And in that moment, the past melted away. After the dance, the room buzzed with quiet whispers and glances. But Amaka didn't care. As she stood beside Chuka, it wasn't about what others thought. It was about what they had become. Later that night, As the office emptied out, Amaka and Chuka stay behind. Just the two of them, sitting in his office with the city lights glowing through the glass walls. "You never really told me why you were selling corn," she said gently. He smiled. "After my mother passed, I inherited everything, properties, shares, the company. But I kept wondering, would people still respect me if I had nothing? Would they see me or just my wealth?" He paused, looking into her eyes. "I went undercover for 3 months. No drivers, no suits, just me and a wheelbarrow." Amaka's chest tightened. "And I failed your test." "No," he said. "You passed. Not at first. But you grew. You humbled yourself. And that takes more strength than pretending to be perfect." She didn't know whether to cry or smile. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Chuka reached across the table, gently holding her hand. "I never planned to fall for you, Amaka, but I did." The days that followed were filled with a quiet joy Amaka had never known. No titles, no games, just two people discovering each other, one truth at a time. Chuka remained professional in the office, but their bond could no longer be hidden. Team members noticed the subtle glances, the soft smiles, the way their energies aligned during meetings. One afternoon, Kemi pulled Amaka aside again. "So you and Chuka, huh?" Amaka smiled. This time, there was no fear or guilt. "Yeah, but it's more than what people think." "I believe you," Kemi replied, "because I've seen how you've changed." Later that evening, Amaka and Chuka sat on a quiet rooftop, watching the Lagos sun dip below the horizon. "I never imagined I'd fall for someone like you," Amaka admitted. "Not just a CEO, but someone so grounded." Chuka took her hand, his voice low. "And I never imagined the woman who laughed at me would become the one I trust most." They laughed softly. There was no bitterness left, only grace. And under that fading orange sky, two people who once lived in judgment and pride now stood in something far more powerful. Love. Real. Deep. Forged through fire. The year-end gala was the biggest event on Visionaire Advertising's calendar. Red carpet, flashing cameras, high-profile clients, and an audience filled with Nigeria's finest. Amaka looked stunning in a flowing emerald gown. She walked into the grand ballroom, heart fluttering, not just because of the event, but because of what was coming. Chuka stood on stage later that evening, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne. He smiled at the crowd. "This year we broke records. We challenged the industry. But above all, we reminded the world to look again beyond appearances." He paused. "I'd like to introduce the brilliant mind behind the viral campaign that changed us all." He turned. "Amaka Ease, please join me." The spotlight hit her. The room erupted in applause. She rose, nerves shaking, and walked the stage. But Chuka wasn't finished. "Before she says a word, let me say this. Sometimes the person you mock on the roadside is the same person who holds your future. And sometimes forgiveness gives birth to love." Gasps filled the room. He turned to her, gently took her hand, and asked, "Amaka, may I have this dance?" She nodded through tears, and the whole room faded away. As the music began to play, Chuka led Amaka gently to the center of the dance floor. The crowd stepped aside, creating a circle of quiet admiration around them. Her heart pounded. Not with fear this time, but with something warmer, fuller. This was real. As they moved slowly to the rhythm, Chuka leaned in. "You once laughed at me," he whispered. She winced slightly. "But today," he continued, "I'm dancing with a woman who taught me that even the proud can grow, and that grace is more powerful than gold." Amaka's eyes shimmered with tears. "I judge you by what I saw, but I've come to love who you truly are," she said. Around them, the murmurs turned to smiles. Colleagues, clients, even media guests were moved. Not by a love story between a CEO and an employee, but by the story of redemption, humility, and truth. As the music faded, the room erupted in applause. Chuka kissed her forehead softly. For the first time, their story wasn't hidden. It was in the open, and it was beautiful. A story that began with a laugh was now ending in love, but there was still one more step to come. A few months later, Visionaire Advertising held a press event to announce a new company direction. More grassroots campaigns, community focus, and talent empowerment. And standing right beside Chuka at the press podium was Amaka. She had been officially promoted to head of strategy, with her Look Again campaign now part of University Case studies across Nigeria. During the Q/A, a reporter asked Chuka, what inspired such a bold approach to leadership? Chuka smiled, then looked at Amaka. My inspiration? A woman who once mocked a corn seller, but later taught the world that growth is always possible. Laughter filled the room, warm, respectful laughter. Later that evening, away from the cameras, Chuka and Amaka sat on a quiet bench behind the company building, where no one watched and no roles mattered. I never imagined that the man I mocked would become my mentor and my love, she whispered. He took her hand. And I never imagined the woman who laughed would be the one I couldn't stop loving. They smiled. From a dusty roadside to a shining boardroom, their journey had been anything but ordinary, because in the end, it wasn't about titles or wealth. It was about seeing each other, truly, and never looking away again. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, and share. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what kindness inspired you today. Thanks for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, a small act can change the world.